Hey everyone, welcome to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. This podcast is all about farmers markets, how to increase your market business success while providing people with fresh food. Farmers markets are essential. Whether you're a farmers market manager or a small farmer or food maker selling at farmers markets, you have found just the right podcast. This week on Tent Talk, we're talking about how to find new farmers and vendors for your farmers market. Hey everyone, I'm one of your hosts, Bridget Myers. I'm a longtime farmers market manager and online educator at Farmers Market Pros.
And I'm Kat Fields-White, Director of San Diego Markets, Farmers Market Manager and Consultant, founder of Farmers Market Pros, and host of the Farmers Market Pros community.
And I'm Justine Marzoni-Mead, Tent Talk producer and marketing director for Farmers Market Pros.
Today's episode of Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is supported by Farmers Market Pro's own online course, Marketing for Markets. If you're a market manager, maximize your market's reach. If you're a farmer or food maker, learn to keep your customers engaged and attract new ones with this easy-to-access resource. Make your social media accounts sing and leverage the power of Google Business, Yelp, and more with simple online instruction from our marketing experts. If you're ready to increase your traffic and your income, find Marketing for Markets on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com and start taking things to the next level today.
Well, welcome back to Tent Talk, everybody. This week we are discussing how to find and recruit new farmers and vendors for your farmers market. Again, not something you really check the box and then you're done. This is an ongoing task we have as market managers, right? Sometimes a really fun task, sometimes a really stressful and frustrating task. So we're going to give you some good hints.
Yeah, and this is something that you may have done recently, gearing up for your spring season. So maybe you're breathing easy because your market is full right now, but like Bridget said, sooner or later you're going to have to do it again.
You'll have another spot for a lot of reasons. So why? Let's talk about why we would be looking for new farmers and vendors.
Yeah, why are we scouting? I'd say if you're starting a new market altogether, which of course happens year-round for all sorts of people, whether you're a brand new market manager or you have a market or markets and you're adding to your schedule of markets. So you need some new vendors, even if you already have some kind of on your roster at your other markets, those people aren't necessarily available on the day for your new market. Yeah. So you've got to search elsewhere to get some new blood there.
Yeah, or maybe your market isn't full in a very specific category because you had a vendor, say you had a vendor that sold granola at your market for 8 years and they had awesome granola, but
they moved out of town.
They moved out of town, or they've gotten so big that they're selling to grocery stores and markets aren't, something that they're doing anymore. Or maybe they, have different business decisions, or they close their business, or yada, yada, yada. So you need a new granola vendor, and you're looking for a very specific item to fill that hole.
Because it was popular at your market, your demographic at your market, the shoppers are, looking for that kind of product.
You just want to make sure that people can do all their grocery shopping at your market, so you got to cover all those categories.
Yeah,
that's right.
The less reasons we give people to have to run to a big box grocery store, the better.
Yeah,
that's right. Or maybe your market is not full, or not as full as you'd like it to be, or not as full as you have room for in your market location, because of vendor turnover related to an outside circumstance, such as, worldwide pandemic. So maybe you have some vendors who maybe said they were going to come back. They were trying to figure things out, and they ended up closing their business for good, or moving somewhere, or maybe selling their business to someone else that decided to do the online sales only. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that we have vendors that leave the market and don't come back. So maybe you've just had a few too many of those, and you'd like to kind of zhuzh your market back up and fill those spaces.
Or maybe there is a really bad baby vendor that you had to kick out and you have to replace.
I'm like, a baby vendor. Oh, a vendor acting like a baby. Yeah.
That happens.
That happens. So maybe you had a bad vendor relation, and that person offered a great variety of a product that was popular at your market.
Yeah.
And you just had to ask them not to come back. So then you're looking to fill a vacancy. Maybe you're expanding your market and you have more room. So either you've had space available that you could fill, or maybe you are taking over a nearby plaza or an extra street, or maybe you've moved locations of your markets, which I know talking to other market managers, especially the last 2 years, markets have had to kind of bebop around.
It's happened a lot.
It's happened a lot. I've really heard more of it happening lately than usual, Which can sometimes be a good thing. Sometimes you're moving to a better location and a bigger location.
Yeah.
So you have more space to fill. Maybe you were at capacity at the place where you were before, and now you can invite new vendors to participate in the market, and it can be more of a one-stop shop because you can offer more products.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, like a little hermit crab getting a new shell.
That's right.
That's true.
A new and bigger shell.
In a
That's
big
right.
old house. I'm going to use that expression. So how do we get vendors to come to us?
I mean, that's ideal, right?
Yes.
To be in a situation where you're not spending the bigger part of your day hunting down those vendors and begging them to come to your market. It would be great if they were knocking on your door asking to come to your market.
And actually, sometimes they're eager to do that if you make it easy for them to do it. So having an easily accessible, really visible vendor application on your website, popping that link up on your social media from time to time, that can be just such a simple thing that will make such a huge difference. I was working with a farmers market group recently, and I had asked them, why do you only they have added a winter market, so they essentially have a year-round market, but they still take applications once a year during this time. And that's really prominent on their website, that this is when the application process closes. I said, so I'm just curious, why do you do that? Do you not ever have anybody leave during the year? Are you out of space? You're down to your last square inch. You just can't fit anybody else on there. And they said, well, no, actually, we do take applications all year. But they're not telling anybody that.
It's a secret. You got to do a secret knock.
yeah, what's the passcode?
Exactly. So I suggested to them that maybe they wanted to make that really obvious and really visible, because there are constantly new businesses starting and new people coming online and people making the decision that farmers markets could be the way to go. Let them know that you're open to new applications.
Yeah.
That's so simple and works so well.
Yeah, and I think that's really helpful, like coming from a past vendor point of view. When we were getting into markets, there was a couple months ahead of time that we knew we wanted to be in markets. We just weren't quite there yet. And so if you have your vendor application open and people can apply, get everything that they need in order, and then by the time even if you have a seasonal market, by the time the season comes around, they're there, they're ready. But there is kind of this like little in between time where people are ready to apply, but they're not right. They're not quite there to be in the markets.
Yeah, and if you have a hard stop on your vendor applications, you're going to miss out on potentially some really great vendors that could help your market, even if they come in mid-season. So if that's a possibility, or if that's something that you already do, and you already do take vendor applications for your whole season, I understand like the urgency and being like, hey, please get your applications in by this deadline because we'd like to like start this
seasonal.
Yeah, if we'd like to start the season off like robustly and really get our ducks in a row. So you can say like, okay, please get it in if you want to start the season with us. But then if you really are accepting applications after that, change that messaging so that it's clear to vendors that
There's
they can
actually
apply.
a large market in our area that under a different manager some years back, they were full. He basically just didn't want to deal with any new vendors. And so it says on their website, there's a 2-year waiting list to get into this market. And that notation has stayed up there for years and years, even though they're taking new vendors all the time.
Yeah.
I just saw that on their website the other day. But yeah, it's like, and then people get in their heads, oh, I can never get into that market.
And they actually consider, and what happens to us is they call us, we've also got a very large market, and they'll call us and say, now I know there's a couple years waiting time. And I'm like, no, not necessarily. What is it that you sell? For certain categories, we've got an opening right now.
Yeah.
So, you don't want to put that out there. That's just silly.
Yeah, and kind of on the coattails of that, one great way to get to have vendors come to you and solicit you and want to be part of your market is just by having a successful market, by doing the best you can and having a beautiful, bustling market, or at least just a consistent market, something that the potential vendors know is going to exist in 3 months, or if they know that shoppers are going to come to. If they come to your market and they see that it's beautiful and it's operating and shoppers are there, they're going to want to be there.
Yeah, so maybe like you got to put out what you want to attract.
Yeah.
So if you put out like a really consistent professional market that's curated nicely, you will find yourself attracting vendors coming to you to ask to apply that you are looking for.
Right.
Because they'll understand what it takes to be a part of your market. And so those people will come to you. You'll, of course, get other vendors that apply that don't fit your market because if it's a big, busy professional looking market. Everyone wants to get in, but you'll kind of draw those other vendors to you if you're putting that out there.
Well, and to that point, big market, small market, whatever, in the same way that you want to make your application visible online, you want to be welcoming at the market. So you want your staff trained to talk to people who walk up to the booth and say, how do I get into the market? You want to make sure they've got a flyer or something to give people so that people know where to find your application. Have a quick FAQ, kind of, frequently asked questions that they can run through with potential vendors so that the vendors feel welcome to continue the process.
Exactly. And even if you don't process new applicants at the market, you can still have like brief conversations with them and then say, okay, our application's online if you're ready to go, or, oh, you're new to markets. Here's Reno101.com. Or, send us an email. So, get that system in place and make sure your staff understands how new vendors, what's your, preferred way for new vendors to apply, and make sure everyone's on the same page there. So the vendors aren't confused. Because if they get too frustrated and confused, they'll just go to the next market.
Yeah. And another important thing to think about is to have good relationships with your vendor. Just do the things that you do and be an awesome market operator. But if you have good relationships with your vendors and the vendors you do have are happy, guess what? Vendors go to a bunch of different markets and they talk to all those other different vendors. So if you are looking for somebody, or if, maybe you let one of your rock star vendors that you have a really good relationship know, like, hey, we are looking for vendors. They're going to talk to their friends at other markets, and maybe they know an incredible baker that they might say, hey, you should come over here. I have a really great time at this market on Saturdays.
And they basically do your recruiting for you.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
We've actually sometimes, when starting new markets especially, done an incentive for existing vendors and said, we're looking for vendors in this category. If you send somebody to us and if they're accepted into the market, and if they stay we usually say you have to stay in the market for 12 weeks, I think, then we give that referral vendor a little bonus. We'll give them,
a nice
2 weeks
perk.
Free rent or a month's free rent or something, depending on what you're looking for. Because yes, your current successful vendors are absolutely your best recruiters.
Definitely. They're a good resource because they can answer questions about how the market is operated from a vendor's point of view, which other vendors do want to know about. So, getting your other vendors to help you kind of recruit is a great idea. If you do need to venture out and start knocking on doors and looking for vendors, where are some good places that farmers market managers can go?
Well, if you're looking for farmers, there's a lot of online lists of certified farmers. Maybe check with your local ag extension group. Look at small farm conferences, meetups. There's some online groups in a lot of areas for, Facebook groups that are young farmers or beginning farmers. And those are great places to meet new farmers that might want to be getting into a market and oftentimes have no idea really how markets work. So providing a little bit of information, become active in those groups, answer their questions, that can be really helpful.
Yeah, there's also maybe in your area, here we have a San Diego small business group that does some like farmer training. Maybe find if there's a local farmer training program in your area, and you might be able to, get really new farmers interested in your market. Or like in Come Through PDX, they have a affiliate farmers market or farmer training program. So those can kind of be funnels for your market too.
And a lot of times those people that run those kind of operations, those training programs, would love to have a market manager come talk to their farmers about how markets work and what the advantages are for farmers of going to a market, keeping your whole retail price, and this is how you set up, and give them an idea of what the fees are. A lot of times farmers have no idea what they have to pay to be in a market, so they're reluctant to contact you.
Yeah, and remember that maybe farmers know one farmer who was in a couple markets and they didn't have a pleasant experience, and that farmer's telling other farmers kind of what they think is the system at all markets. And so kind of giving that information out from the point of view as the market manager can be really helpful, because they just don't have access to that. And there might be one sour grape that just had a bad experience, and they talk to each other too. So try to kind of reaffirm that markets are a good place for farmers to be, and this is why.
And maybe find a farmer that does love your markets and get them to back that up.
For sure.
So get them to let them know that we'd love for them to talk to new farmers that they run across, or old farmers that haven't done markets that might want to be interested in joining.
Yeah, so kind of same approach you take with your vendors. Just kind of go out there and get the good word spread around, and find a good fit, and don't try to force every single farmer and vendor to fit into your market. That's not really how a successful markets grow. But say this is what we offer. This is the true and honest way that this market works. we think it'd be a good fit for your business and this is how, and then kind of be open to having those discussions with them.
Yep.
For other vendors that you're looking for, this can go for farmers too, but grocery items. So going to other markets to scout, I think, can be a good idea. And, we've seen other market managers at our markets before.
We've been at other market
Been
managers.
at other markets scouting.
In disguise.
In disguise. Oh, it's hard to hide, actually. Especially if Kat and I walk through a market with the clipboard, people get real wild.
Like, are you taking us over?
Yeah, are you taking over? Are you taking all these vendors to your market? But there is like a code of ethics, and we are very, first
We
of all,
don't usually scout a Saturday market.
Yeah.
We're looking for vendors for our Saturday market.
I was going to say we're working on Saturday, so it's hard for us to scout a Saturday
true.
market.
Yeah.
And also, that would be
It's just tacky.
That'd be tacky. It doesn't feel good to go to a market that's on the same day and try to pull a vendor over to your market and take it away from another market.
A lot of times my opening question to a vendor or a farmer in another market, say I'm trying to recruit for my Wednesday market.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I am, if anybody's listening. But I'll go
Gotta
out,
put it out there.
Right? But I'll go out to a Tuesday market or a Saturday market and say, hey, are you working anywhere on Wednesdays?
Yeah.
So, it's just a nice etiquette thing that you're not trying to pull them away from another market that they're already committed to, but maybe they don't work anywhere, and I had this happen last week. Somebody said, no, I've got a Tuesday market and a Thursday market. I'd love a Wednesday market.
Yeah.
So, it worked out well. But I usually use that as an opener just so that I'm not poaching.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to. Yeah, that's a good word that we try to not be. It's a poacher.
Yeah. And depending on, I don't know, you can let me know if this sounds scandalous to you as longtime market managers. But if you do have relationships with other market managers that have a market on a different day of the week, you could just ask them.
Yeah,
do you
we do
have
that.
any awesome vendors that sell this or that? Or, hey, I really love a farmer that sells potatoes. Do you have anybody at your market that you think would be interested in selling at my market?
Yeah, and we do that a lot with certain managers. Now, it's really funny. Some, we had, if you go back to an old podcast from the ladies in Chicago where they said the whole idea of one market manager talking to another market manager just seemed scandalous. Just seemed, impossible. But in fact, I think we're learning as we go along, or I hope we are, and I think a lot of market managers are, that we're not really competing with each other. We're competing with big box grocery stores.
Yeah.
So it's to our advantage if all farmers markets are thriving. And so we do have some market managers that are not forthcoming and generally don't want to talk. But we also have a nice little network of farmers market managers in town that do share resources and that say, oh, I've got this great baker. They could use a couple more days. Do you have an opening at your Thursday? Do you have an opening at your Sunday? So that's absolutely a great way to give vendors new opportunities and to make all markets better.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just remember when you're talking to vendors that are at your markets and they're saying, oh, I really love doing this. I want to, not just do it on the side. I want to go full time. What do you think about this market? What do you think about this market? And giving them some great recommendations for other markets to participate in. They'll probably go to that market manager and say, Kat said that your market would probably be a really good fit for me. I'm glad I'm applying to this market. Just think about how that's going to land. When someone comes to us and says, oh, we're at, this other market during the week and they recommended that we come apply over here, that makes me feel good that another market manager would give us kind of accolades and a referral to have another vendor at our market. So kind of just...
Yeah, that's a great way to,
in good
share
faith,
resources.
Build that community.
Yeah.
For sure. But yeah, I would say try not to be sleazy about it. Don't go and talk poorly about other market managers. That's not the way to ever get ahead, and we don't ever do it, and that's just something we don't do, and that's, again, it's not our competition, and even if they don't run the market in the way that you do, there's no reason to even talk about it. Just don't talk about it.
Yeah, if it's a market that I really can't recommend to somebody, I'll just say, they do things a little differently than we do. And I just leave it at that.
Yeah.
I'd never say, oh, it's a bad market or, we don't like the way that guy operates. But I will admit that, their markets operate a little bit differently than ours. We do love this market. We're real familiar with this market or this manager. So I try to spend my time talking about the positive things.
For sure. And if you go to a market and you say, hey, I can tell you're not getting that many sales. This market is dead. Why don't you come over to my market? It's much busier. You'll get a reputation real fast.
Yeah.
Because everyone has a big mouth in the farmer's market world.
Yeah.
So newsflash, there's a little pro tip for you.
Yeah.
Prepared food vendors, you can go to... Oh, wait, talking about grocery items, too.
And that also applies to prepared food, actually.
Yeah. So talking to commercial kitchens is a great way to get new vendors.
That's really smart.
If you're in a place where they make you cook your food in a commercial kitchen. I know sometimes those vendors are making it at home, but people who, sell supplies to them, or people that are just in like the kitchen world for vendors or small businesses that do pop-ups or other markets. Just make connections with them.
It's such a good idea to develop relationships with people that do rental kitchen space, with people that sell takeout containers, with people that sell restaurant equipment, because you will run into, they'll contact you or they'll just point a new vendor in your direction.
Yeah, banners, pop-up tents, like just make those connections and let those people know that, you know, if you have any vendors, like send them our way. So you'll be surprised how much that conversation gets going. And people, you know, people in those businesses, they want to recommend something that's going to be great for their client.
Yeah.
So that makes them look good, helps you.
And also
Keeps their client in business and renting kitchen space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those people who are operating commercial kitchens, they want you to send them your vendors too. So that's a really, you know, I remember when I took Vendor 101, Kat, you know, a million years ago, Kat recommended the person that ended up being the kind of like our little kitchen mentor, and we rented kitchen space from him, and finding him on the internet would have been impossible. So, you know, having those connections is definitely a two-way street.
Yeah, for sure.
Win-win.
Yeah. And then going to other kind of pop-up events, so not a weekly farmers market, but just like an annual special event is a great way to find vendors that are doing a good job. It's good to go on site to see people. This is why going out to markets and going to other events is kind of nice as a market manager, because you can really see how they operate, what their booth looks like, what their product looks like.
If they're in their booth.
Are they in their booth? That's kind of the first thing I look at. Like, oh, okay, I'm not going to invite that vendor to be at our market if they're, you know, down the block and not in their booth, and you know, they don't have anything on their table and their signage is hanging off by one string, and you know, so you can kind of get a better idea. Whereas looking online, you can't always tell if this is going to be a good professional vendor.
And you can order their food and taste it and see if it's yummy and something that you would want at your market. And those are that's the value of going to those pop-up markets, because not, you know, I mean, if you're Kat, people will probably recognize you. But, you know, people might recognize you when you're walking through the market. But go wear a baseball cap and just enjoy it and eat the food and, you know, just kind of see it as a customer. And then that way, if that application comes through, you'll be like, oh, I recognize this person. Or, I tasted those baked goods and I don't really think they're a good fit for my market.
Yeah, exactly. And as a vendor, if you're a vendor listening, just kind of understand that market managers and event coordinators, they're out there at these other events. So kind of put your A game out there all the time, because maybe if you're at an event or a market that's not really jiving and working for you, and you're going to be looking for other places to go and set up, or you want to add to your schedule every week, having, you know, putting your best foot forward every time you're at an event or at a market is really going to help you, because we do go out there and we're scouting out there.
Secret shoppers.
That's right.
That's right. And those tips actually apply very much to non-food items as well, because those pop-up events, the makers arcades, the artisan fairs, a lot of times you can find good, you know, you'll find somebody selling aprons, or you'll find somebody selling cards, or something that would be a good fit for your non-food section.
For sure. Yeah, and we do a lot of crossover and stuff too. And we do annual events, and market managers usually have other events on their docket. So
yeah, I did run into Kat at a Christmas market.
Oh, that's right.
She was out scouting.
I was.
That's right.
That's right.
Oh, she was wearing a face mask, so that was kind of a little incognito.
I was wearing a face mask?
Yeah, like a COVID face mask.
Oh.
Oh, you ran into her recently.
Yeah.
I meant when you were a vendor and she was scouting.
So too.
No, is this holiday
Did
season?
I wear a mask?
I saw you at Maker's Arcade.
That's right. That's right.
Makers, yeah.
That's true. I was scouting. That is absolutely true. And I found a couple people there too. So it works.
So say you find a vendor that you really like, somebody that you're hoping will come over to your market. Maybe you saw them at a pop-up event, or it was a recommendation from a vendor you have at your market. What can you do to kind of court that vendor and kind of bring them under your wing? Because it's not just, hey, come to my market. Okay, and then they start next week. Sometimes it takes a little bit, or maybe they live farther away and you kind of have to convince them to make the commute down to your market once a week. So what can you do when you're courting a potential new vendor?
Well, I think what you want to remember, and what is so complicated, and why our stickers that say "my job is weird" are so accurate, is that we have a lot of different relationships with our vendors. So we almost have to treat them like employees, or almost like tenants sometimes, because they have to follow certain rules. But in the end, your vendors are your clients. That's who pays your space rent, and that probably pays your staff and pays for your marketing and all of those things. So dealing with a potential vendor is just like a vendor dealing with a potential new customer. So you want to compliment their display and their products. Tell them that's a nice sweater. Ask a little bit about their business and their background. If there's kids in the booth, talk a little bit to them about, is this a family business that you're working on? It's all those things that you do in any situation, whether you're making new friends or having your first date or working with a new client. You're doing things that build relationship, and that's where it all starts.
For sure. Yeah. Just treating it like you're not doing them a favor by inviting them to your market. Don't have that kind of attitude. Build a relationship. Think of it as a relationship. So how would you want to start that? You'd want to start it on a friendly note and, and explain. And also keep in mind, don't try to pull a vendor to your market just because they're a busy vendor that attracts a big crowd. Think about, is it going to be a good fit for them?
Yeah.
Is the demographic at your market, your shoppers at your market, are they going to buy this vendor's product and be excited about it? Is it going to be worth their time and effort to come to your market? You really need to get your kind of head wrapped around that and not just look at this big shiny new vendor that's really busy. Think about, is that going to be a good fit for them?
Yeah.
And for you. So, you want to make sure that it's going to be something that adds to your market, and it's going to be something also that adds to the success of their business. Yeah. And then you want to get into the nitty-gritty, ask where else they're selling, chat about their schedule, and whether they have capacity. You want to sell a new farmer or vendor on your market if you need to fill that space, but at the same time, you don't want to use your amazing sales skills to convince somebody to come into your market when they don't really have the capacity to do it well.
Yeah.
So it's not going to do you any favors to kind of insist and wheedle and charm and get them into your market when they really don't have room for one more market on their schedule, and they're going to end up failing. It's not a good look to have a vendor come into your market and fail out, even though it's not your market's fault. It'll appear that in some way it's your market's fault. So be careful to be sure that they actually have the capacity to take on another market and do a good job.
And sometimes as a vendor, that's hard to know.
Yeah.
Like especially a grocery, you're balancing okay, I have to have these production days, and then if I'm gonna have fresh baked goods at the market, I have to bake those baked goods, and so sometimes squeezing a market in is like, oh well, I can make that much more money, but so that's also something to consider depending on how long that vendor's been around. If they've been a vendor for a few years, they probably have a better idea of, I can make that work. Or if they're brand new, you don't want to pressure them into adding on another thing just because they see dollar signs of the potential of making more sales.
Right. They got to grow at a good pace.
Yeah.
So you don't want to rush them.
Understanding that new vendors probably have to take a slower pace, for sure. I mean, we've had our big Saturday market, and then we've also had weekday markets that are a better pace for newer vendors. And so it's nice to have that conversation and say, yeah, your product is really great. We'd love to have you at the Saturday market, eventually, but actually the weekday markets is probably a better starting off point for you. It'll make more sense. You can gradually build your market business up, and you'll be more successful. You'll stay in the markets, which is a success for us, and just kind of being realistic about that.
Yeah, production capacity is a big thing. And then if it does sound like a good fit and they do have time and they've got the capacity to come on, that's the time you want to mention maybe some other farmers and vendors that excel at your market. Maybe ones that are in a market that they're already in, so they understand and they can have somebody to kind of turn to as a reference. And then once you've reached that agreement between you that it sounds like it's a good fit for both of you, be sure if you're out running into people at pop-up events or if you're at another market, be sure you have a card or a flyer or something to point them to your application so that they can have a way to jump in with you. And if you really love them and it sounds like a good fit and they have time and they're interested, get their contact info because there's a good chance when they're packing up the booth that night, they're going to lose your card. They were busy. They had a conflict that night with somebody. And so they forget that they were really excited about your market. Make sure that you have their contact info so that if you don't hear from them right away, sometime in the next couple of days you can just pop them an email and say, it was such a pleasure chatting with you at that event, and we'd love when you're ready to see an application from you for our market.
And here's a link to our application.
And here's our link.
This email.
That's right. Make it easy. The more you can do to make it easy, the better.
And I mean, one last note about making it super easy is making sure that on your vendor application, have a little note on there saying what kind of vendors you're looking for, what kind of vendors you don't take at your market, and maybe a little line or two about what the application process looks like. Just because some market managers take any vendor, and you can come to the market day of and pop up, or you can come apply at the market, and they don't have a strict criteria. And so you kind of want to, they might be applying to those markets and assuming you're the same way. If you have a really curated market or a really full market where you're kind of looking for some particular people to fill those gaps, but you're not going to take every vendor, if you don't have kind of a preliminary guidelines on your website or wherever your vendor application is, not going to say that everyone's going to read it, but some people do. And then it'll save you a lot of time and trouble just slogging through a bunch of vendor applications that for vendors that you don't accept at your market or you don't have room for at your market.
All that time spent writing those emails to say, thanks for your application. We don't have a spot in your category, or
and
we don't host your kind of business.
We said that on the application and you didn't read it, but we have to be nicer than that. So yeah, save yourself the time and just be real clear and communicate what you're looking for and how it goes.
Thank you for listening today, and big thanks to Marketing for Markets, providing a fast and easy boost to your marketing knowledge to increase your traffic and your profits. When you go out and find those new vendors, make sure you point them towards Marketing for Markets so they can succeed right from the start. Purchase the class now by clicking the logo on the education page at farmersmarketpros.com.
Farmers markets are all about connection, and all of us, operators, farmers, and vendors, keep learning. Connect with people just like you from various parts of the country and share what's happening in your area in the terrific conversations over in our private Facebook group, the Farmers Market Pros Community. If you're actively involved in a farmers market, please find us there, answer the 3 qualifying questions, and join the group. You can also message us on Instagram at Farmers Market Pros or email us at connect@farmersmarketpros.com. If you're looking for further education, check out our online course offerings at farmersmarketpros.com. Thanks for listening to Tent Talk. Please leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you access your podcasts, and tell us and others how you're enjoying Tent Talk. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss the next episode. Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is proudly produced by Farmers Market Pros, where passion meets profit. Today's episode was recorded and edited by Justine Marzoni Mead. Original music by David Mead. Thank you so much for listening today, and we'll have another great episode next week, so tune in.